That better?
Yeah, you look good in the big chair, sir. Thank you very much for showing up there.
Looking forward to the session, man.
Let's talk. What time do you guys gavel in?
12 o'clock sharp.
That's, as always, at 12 o'clock, but I just want to put it on a record. What's going to happen today as far as the first day of the session? I know it's a lot of house cleaning, but what goes on for the first day?
Well, of course, the first, this time it's a little bit unusual. We're going to swear in a new Sergeant-at-Arms. Larry Wagner's joining us now. Mm-hmm. So that'll be one of the first orders of business. Then we have historically a method that we do, which we name 3 people to go to the governor's office and 3 people to go to the House of Representatives and tell them that we are in session and ready for business. And they've been doing that, I guess, 100 years or so. So we picked 3 senators to go down there, one of which is a freshman, mm-hmm. and 3 to go to the governor's office and 3 to go to the House of Representatives. And so that'll be the second pick. We'll probably adjourn pretty quickly thereafter and go into basically drafting our committee stuff because it's due in the next 2 weeks, our first bills.
For folks who don't know, because I was asked this question, I think most of the committee, I know that most of the committee assignments remain the same, but there could be some changes. Is that a formality or what's the... as far as the Senate's concerned?
On the Senate side, we did name a new chairman of Forestry this year, Tyler McConn. Real pleased with him joining us. We lost 2 senators this year. As you know, Senator Jackson was one of those, and Senator Witherspoon. There were special elections, and though 2 new senators have been elected, and that caused a reshuffle of committee positions that Senator Jackson and Senator Witherspoon were on, and we've done that already and named them all about 2 weeks ago.
What's the number one on your agenda as far as the lieutenant governor?
Well, I think I've got about 4 or 5 of them, really. You know, obviously, the nurse retention program is critical. We're facing, again, a spike here in the latest COVID wave. And Dr. Dobbs has talked to us a number of different times about that. We also, of course, want to have a teacher pay raise in education. My thought is the best workforce development we've got is public education. So we want to do that. We obviously have some issues on roads and bridges that we want to add to. We've got the federal government gave us some additional money, not quite as much as you would think from reading the paper. But in meeting with MDOT people and going over there, there's a match required from us, about $40 million to get that extra money. That'll be a priority for us and get started on both maintenance and new construction for our roads and bridges around the state. And then, of course, the medical marijuana, I'm going to bring it up before you do. I really take advantage of that. I knew you would quickly do that, so I might as well go on and address it anyway.
Well, wait a minute. Because this is a short segment here, and you blew it because there's a betting line out there. How fast I bring this up.
I know. I think I just broke all the bets. I mean, I made the over/under go away.
But I do want to talk about that after because it's going to take a little bit more time. But let me just say that all of those things that you mentioned are appropriations, so they got to go through the appropriation process. Where is this thing? And I want to go back to this one. We had some house cleaning deal that we were going to take care of within the confines of a special session. If it were called, it was not, on some language in a Medicaid or Medicare bill. Medicaid bill.
It's been erroneously in the Capitol referred to as the chokehold. Which would not allow any raises at all on expenses, which one of those things that I think actually came out of the House this time, not to throw them under the bus, because everybody, our side, makes mistakes as well. But I think that was something that was well intended and then in reality did not function well. So meeting with Drew Snyder and talking about doing away with that, I consider that will be one of the earlier items that we'll deal with.
I got you. So that's still on the table.
It is. I think we need to amend that. So does the House and the Senate are all in agreement. Pass a lot of bills. I think there's over 1,000 bills filed last year, and that one was one that's just about a sentence or two that probably should not have been in there.
All right, let's jump into the medical marijuana. You basically said in some interviews that the who knows where the last draft is, because this thing has been going back and forth. The bill that I've printed out and the draft that I have on my desk, which is a couple of reams thick, that you could just throw that thing away. I think we're on, what did you say, the 26th draft?
That was about 5 drafts ago, I think, Paul. Actually, we're probably up around 30 now.
So how long are we going to get a chance to look at this before it's passed or voted on?
Oh, I think what you've got is probably 80 or 90% of what was offered to the governor in September. He did not call a special session, so we have been working with a number of different groups. With our sheriff's group, I personally sent every sheriff a copy of the bill, and we've discussed with them issues. We've discussed with medical professionals the effects of marijuana on younger people to make sure that they're protected. We just discussed with faith-based groups on extending the area away from a church that could be one of these distribution places could be done. We've done a lot of, we protected the landlord rights, no smoking, of course, in any public place. Just a lot of no tax benefits for these people. Just a lot of things that have been tweaked, I think, and changed a little bit as we've gone. I expect the committee hearings, all ours in the Senate, as you know, we publicize all of ours. It's online. Everybody can look at it. I think this bill has been very closely scrutinized, probably more than any other, and it will be brought to committee, and all the senators will ask their questions and voice their opinions. There could be amendments yet to come.
Let's get to the crux of the problem the governor was on yesterday. Is it a deal breaker as far as the Senate is concerned to adhere to his wishes or his concerns about the amount of marijuana that somebody can get at one time?
Well, I think looking at ours is the toughest one. The one that Senator Blackwell and Representative Yancey have proposed is about, it's the tightest one we've seen. It's less than half of what Oklahoma does. You go and look at all of the comparisons to other states, and ours is much more close. I will tell you, I think the Senate side, anyway, is committed to having a medical marijuana bill. Medical. And that does not mean recreational. And we have taken many, many steps. Senator Blackwell has, I think, and his committee will take further steps to make sure that it is a medical marijuana bill.
So does that mean smoking is or is not allowed?
Smoking right now is in the bill. It's not allowed in any public place. It, of course, have to be on private property. Landlords aren't allowed to. Churches don't have to allow people to do it. All that other kind of stuff. But you really have to look at the fact that this smoking would be done in a private place. We've, because of the sheriff's input several months ago, we removed it from automobiles outside the packaging. You can't have it there. So they've really kept tightening this to have a medical marijuana bill.
I do want to ask you more about that. Also the packaging, anything addressing the packaging in there, and also addressing the ability for, apparently, where this stands in the 30 or something drafts now, where lawmakers can profit this, vote on marijuana, and also profit from it. And we'll talk about that when we come back with the governor, the lieutenant governor of the state of Mississippi. It's Delbert Hosemann. Back with more coming up next. I'm not sure if United Van Lines operates in Texas, but I was surprised that they were not on there. But this is a subject I also want to talk about as far as the personal income tax. We'll talk about that one. Let me go over again, circle back one more time just to get to here, because you said there was a draft after draft out there. So do you know any draft that you've seen that changes the 11 joints a day as far as the governor's concerned?
Well, first of all, they informed me that it's not 11. And I need to preface all of this by I wasn't a 65 supporter, Paul. So what I'm following is what I consider to be the will of the people. Over 50% or 60% or 70%, depending on who you talk to, voted to have medical marijuana. So I think that's a mandate for the Senate, anyway, in the House, to address medical marijuana. So when we go into this, we have a limitation on the THC, as I understand it, where very few states do. I know that we restrict our content significantly. I know the amount that's supposed to be given out over a week is, depending on who you talk to, somewhere between 3 cigarettes and the governor's 11. So I don't know about the grams and how we're actually counting these cigarettes. Apparently, it depends, or whatever you call those things. It depends on how much of the weed you put inside the rolled up paper. But if you did 11, according to the people that we talk to, it'd be a very mostly paper. So I really don't know that much about that. It'll be discussed, I think, a lot in committee. There's some pictures of with 3 cigarettes in it that equal the amount of grams that is in the Senate and House bill. So I think some of this may be a little bit overstated, Paul, actually. But we'll see those in the committee meetings. You'll be able to look at them in their little plastic bag and see how many you can actually roll. I don't think that's the real concern to me. I have some concerns. For example, our young people, clearly in my discussions with the professors and doctors in Mississippi, young people, this can affect their brain at a younger age, up to 16 years old. So you have to be very careful. They are prescribing some of this right now, but some of these could be detrimental to younger people. I think that needs to be taken into account. So there are things I think that will be discussed at some detail about the safety of this drug. I had one doctor tell me this is a messy drug, Paul, and by that he meant they weren't really sure because it just had become legal in the last 5 years or so. There haven't been a lot of research other than what was done from the University of Mississippi's field that they were able to do about how this affects a lot of other things. And so doctors are somewhat reluctant to prescribe these kinds of things where they may have a pill that's gone through years of FDA approval and all these other, and they know exactly what buttons it's pushing when you take it. This is not like that, and so it's very. We need to be very cautious here, Paul.
Here's where when you start talking about your concerns for young people and their mental health, then the amount of joints per day leads into that concern, because if you have 11 joints, and I have no idea myself, to be honest with you, I'm in the same boat you are in, is that too much? Because my concern is it going to be a surplus, and if it is a surplus hanging around the house, then your concerns about kids getting this in one form or fashion or the other is exacerbated, and that's where I'm coming from.
Yeah, there's according to these MMCEUs, which is also a new term for me, you'll see explained in the committee meetings for everybody to understand. But there's about 8 a week of those, and then each one of those equals maybe 2 cigarettes or something like that. I think it's over a week. It would be a much smaller number. But again, those will come out in the hearings. And my most concern, Paul, is that we have medical marijuana. Now, we have actually increased the number of the coverages, schizophrenic, autism, these other palliative care for cancer victims. These things have been, I've been convinced that we need that for people who are dying here, that we can make their last days more acceptable and more humane. So with that, medical marijuana probably can be adequately prescribed by people who know what they're doing to help people who have these particular issues. Well,
do you have any concern about a bud tender with 8 days of trading?
Yeah, I do. I have concerns about anybody. The way this works.
Is our pharmacies going to be brought into this then?
I would love for them to be, but it's illegal, so they won't do this. Pharmacies can't do this. We talked about pharmacies early on.
I'm talking about in an advisory position. One way or the other.
They certainly can advise. I remember the one that took care of Mom would always call me when he thought she needed this or less of that. Yeah. So I think our pharmacists are really some of our front line, and I hope that they will be involved in discussing particularly the taxes, where I'd say it melds with other medicines you're making.
But they haven't been so far. The pharmacists haven't been brought into the discussion so far.
They're going to be brought in by the people that go to the pharmacy. Like when I go to the pharmacy and I got a prescription for X, and he will say or she will say, well, if you take gummy bears, the interaction could be detrimental to you. So I think a lot of people talk to their pharmacists when they go in.
Anything on packaging that is a concern to you as far as the packaging?
There's a lot in the bill about packaging and about making sure it's a disclosure. And as you brought up before, if you vote on this bill, you can't own anything through, I think, December the 31st of 22. And I think that's being discussed now. But anybody in the legislature that votes on this won't have an interest in it. So they're trying to cut out any kind of discussion that somebody voted on something so they could start this. And remember, Paul, it's all inside.
Is that going to be a sunset? They can do it in 2 years. You or anybody else can.
I think. Well, look, you only hired them for another 2 years. They only got a 2-year contract. So I think when you start saying they can't participate for the rest of their life, I don't think that's fair.
No, I didn't say that. I said as they're voting in the House and they are in for 4 years, not 2 years.
Well, there's only 2 years left in the session, Paul.
I understand that, but
so,
I'm saying
2 years from now
forward,
they could be out.
Well, the reason I said that is because earlier on they said that they would put a moratorium, or they would put a ban that you could not vote on this or have any profits into it.
Yeah.
But in 2 years that would be dropped and no longer.
I think that was coordinating with the fact that they would be leaving the session at the end of 2 years.
Okay. I want to switch over. Anything else on that? Anything else on this? There's never been a bill
where you said you couldn't vote on something that maybe 2 years from now you want to be a participant. These are citizen legislators.
Then a teacher can be a legislator.
Yeah, I always thought it'd be great to have them as a legislator.
Well, but they can't. My understanding is that's
a House of Representatives move that wasn't in the Senate.
Do you have any Senate teachers who are actively teaching in the Senate?
No, but I'd love to have one.
All right. Let's talk about the Medicaid expansion. Where do you stand on that one as we get ready to open and gavel in at noon?
We are going to have health care provisions, I think, come early on in the session, Paul. One of them will be, of course, this nurse retention program. And I think that's just critical. We have been meeting with community colleges and universities about paying for part of your tuition as a nurse if you agree to stay in Mississippi. I've done some polling among the community colleges and universities about, do you have the capacity physical plan, and do you have the number of teachers that you would need to expand nursing? Getting mixed reports about that on the capacity to do that. On the issue of whether or not we should have working people have some type of insurance, I think that will be discussed this year. I don't want to be held up on some moniker about some president 3 terms ago, but I think there'll be discussions about working people being able to have some kind of coverage if they have a catastrophic illness.
Final segment with the Lieutenant Governor, Delbert Hosemann, coming up next. Studios. Governor, let me ask you a question here.
Yes,
one of the things that we had talked about is with all of this money coming in, with the Medicaid to put some more people on health care, whether greatly reduced or free health care, all of those things, and I think you talked about this with the governor, that said the federal funding that will be available. Governor Reeves says he sides with Lieutenant Governor Hosemann and his idea of making generational change. And I think a lot of taxpayers always ask this question: how long should a government program last to actually affect generational change?
Well, we have a time frame. The legislation says 3 years. So what I'm speaking of by transformational would be the money we invest last for a generation. For example, water, sewer, broadband, the things that will be in the ground serving us for generations to come. Now, that precludes things like immediate bonuses. Our firefighters need a bonus, our policemen need a bonus, but we give a bonus, that is a one-year thing. And then you have to try to match it the next year. So when we talk about long-term, I'm talking about investing the money currently over the next 3 years so that it will be in the ground, on broadband, on water, on sewer, on roads and bridges and those things for years, for 10, 20, 30 years from now. So it's the effect that lasts over generations, not the expenditure of the funds.
You and I have talked for a long, long time about workforce development, something that you've been passionate about for a long time.
Yep.
What are we going to see in the 2022 that you guys can come together on?
Paul, this is one of the most complicated things. There's 2 things that bother me tremendously. One is the cost of living. It is continuing to spiral here. It is not transitory, as our current president would like to say. It's like 6% or more now, and I am very worried about that hitting our families at the kitchen table. And so I think a lot of our work that needs to be done when we look at tax relief and we look at some of this other legislation has to be with an eye towards what is our cost of living increases. And this is a dichotomy of the worst order. In January of 2019, there were 7,841 people on actually unemployment benefit requests. Last week, 2 weeks ago, in December the 18th, there were 5,225, less than when we had 2 years ago. So we have less people making unemployment claims, but we have the same workforce participation rate, which means the number of people working and looking for work versus the number of people eligible to work, it's only 55%. Somewhere in here, we're off. About 5% of our people, if we were at the national average, should be working in Mississippi. And if we can find a way to get those people up to the national average, that last 5%, then a lot of this goes away. A lot of our issues go away. We basically don't have enough people actually looking for work. Our workers, people who have worked before that are unemployed is relatively minor. We're basically fully employed right now of everybody that wants to work. But we still have this 5 or 6% below the national average of people who should be at least looking for work. In Mississippi, we're at a 55% labor participation rate.
I was looking at the 54,000 people on the dashboard this morning. 54,000 jobs are open on the Employment Security dashboard this morning. Yeah. So all of that said, we're going into the 2022 session. We haven't identified exactly why there's a common denominator, why these people are not working?
We have asked a lot. I've asked the state economists. I've asked all of our community college people, how can we reach out? For example, we may have a single mom that doesn't have a skill. Can we get them into a skill, either a technical skill or complete their high school or junior college, community college thing? Hines, for example, is doing one of these reach out programs. How do we get this unemployed or chronically unemployed back in the workforce?
I got you.
Now, what's happened, Paul, to help us is people were talking about a $15 an hour rate. You know, we're blowing through that. I mean, if you go to work in one of the furniture manufacturers, it's $19.33 plus benefits. Concrete truck drivers are $67,000 a year, which is more than I make. I mean, you go down the line here, we have now the economic incentives for people to go to work. We just have to get them from where they are right now to the job site some kind of way.
We can't do that unless we identify exactly why. But we're almost out of time here, and I've got to circle back to one question.
Okay.
There are many on the C Spire text line, but here's one. Can you ask the Lieutenant Governor who's going to test the percentages? This is back to marijuana. Who checks that out? There is no one to check this, and it's very expensive to check it. Who will do the testing on what the people will be putting in their bodies?
Well, we've worked out an agreement, and Andy Gibson is going to do it personally.
he's
Paul, we have testing labs that are set up for this. It will be tested.
Wait a minute. Now you're going to send a lot of people into counseling. You know that, don't you? So.
We'll have testing labs on here, and
I got it.
I'd encourage everybody to watch the hearings and voice your opinions. We've got our senators will be sitting there. They'll listen to our people.
Governor, do not be a stranger, sir. We look forward to touching base with you often.
Thank you. I hope you're feeling better, Paul. Your leg okay?
That's to be determined. So. We will have news coming up next.